Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Parent and Caregiver as Partners Conference. I'm Michelle Adams. I'm an ABA facilitator with the TDSB, and I have my colleague Natalia Charles here also. She's a BCBA with the TDSB Autism Regional Services team.
Good
So
morning.
we just want to welcome you, and we're going to get started with the land acknowledgement. So the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis peoples. I acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. So today, Natalia and I are going to be talking about generalization of school skills into the home environment, and just really the importance of taking the skills that your child learns at school and how do we generalize those so that they're applicable at home and that they continue to practice those skills. So before we get started with the content, just want to go through this disclaimer. The information provided by the TDSB Autism Regional Services team is intended strictly for educational purposes and professional development of the TDSB staff, parents, and guardians. All professional learning material is the sole property of TDSB and shall not be used, published, shared, copied, reproduced, posted, disseminated, redistributed, transmitted, or otherwise communicated in any other format outside of TDSB without prior written consent of the TDSB Autism Regional Services team. Links to external websites are examples of available resources. These websites and servers are maintained by third parties over whom TDSB has no control. TDSB does not provide any warranty about the availability, completeness, timelines, accuracy, or source of information found on any of these websites or servers, or the content of any file the user might choose to download from a third-party website. Descriptions of or references to products, services, or publications in these websites do not imply endorsement of that product, service, or publication by the TDSB. TDSB or any other third parties mentioned on these websites shall not be liable for any damages resulting from the use, misuse, or inability to use these websites or their information. For any questions, please contact myself, Michelle Adams, or my colleague, Natalia Charles, for further information. So today's learning outcome is we just want to get everyone to develop a better understanding of what generalization and maintenance is, and particularly of the school skills that could be used in the home environment and how do we transition them into all environments with families. So the agenda for today is I'm going to do a quick overview of what is applied behavior analysis, or ABA, what is generalization and maintenance. Then Natalia is going to join and do homeschool communication, and she's going to talk about examples of skills that can generalize at home and strategies to promote generalization at home. So let's get started with the definition of ABA. So ABA is the application of the science of learning to understand and improve behavior that is meaningful to the person and those around them. It considers how the environment impacts learning, and ABA can help increase helpful or functional skills and or decrease behaviors that are harmful or interfere with learning. So when Natalia and I go into classrooms and talk to educators about ABA, we're not talking about ABA in a clinical type form. We're talking about general good educational practices that teachers are using all the time. Things such as reinforcement, prompting, using visuals, helping to shape teaching skills, as well as, again, how to generalize and maintain skills. So we are always looking at how the environment impacts learning and how the environment changes and is involved with behavior. And we always focus on positive-based ABA supports. So what is generalization and maintenance? I'm going to give a brief overview of each of the definitions. So what is generalization? Generalization is the ability for a student to perform a skill under different conditions in different environments, and the ability to apply that skill in a different way. So the process of taking a skill learned in one setting, example at school, and applying it into another setting. So how do we move what they've learned in school really into home or out into the community or even at childcare settings, when you're visiting other families, when you're traveling? How do we take all those really great skills that they're learning and tweak them and make sure that they generalize across different people, across different locations? Um, so we always want to think about how could this skill be used in other environments. So I know that's one thing that Natalia and I always talk to teachers and support staff about when we go into classrooms. Um, if you are teaching this skill, how can it apply into other environments, or how could we share that information with the family to ensure that they're able to practice those skills at home or when they're out in the community? So the benefits of generalization. So first and foremost, generalization promotes independence, and it always allows students to learn to modify their skills in other environments, right? As I said before, different people, different materials, different locations. And it really helps to improve the long-term retention of skills, right? Many times students can do things, but maybe only at school or maybe only with one particular teacher. And I know as parents, you'll even find that sometimes our kids will do things at home that they may not be doing at school. So it works vice versa, right? And always keep that in mind. How can you think of some of the skills that maybe your child has at home to maybe reverse that? How can that be translated into school? How could you share that information with the classroom teacher about how to transition that over into the school environment, or even outside on the playground, or again, at daycare or childcare, or when you're doing social skills groups or having play dates with peers. So you always want to consider about varying your instructions, as I said before, and location and people. And I think the big thing is that this really does promote independence, right? The more that you practice in all different places, the more independent your child's going to become doing that skill, right? It's all about practice, practice, practice. So what is maintenance? So maintenance is referred to the continuous performance of a skill over time once all the teaching has ceased. So meaning, once your child is really doing that skill consistently, right? So I'm going to think about a life skill here. So if we're thinking about, let's say, toilet training, right? When we've all worked on toilet training with our children, once they're doing it at home, then they're going to be doing that out into the community, at school, at family members, public washrooms. All the continued performance of that skill means that they're going to maintain that skill over time. It's very rare that a student or a child will learn how to toilet train and then suddenly not. I mean, it does happen sometimes, but it could be, medical reasons or other things, right? So think about things like getting dressed or making a snack or, drinking juice, even, all the different skills that your student or your child, will learn. It's that continued performance. So the more times you see them doing it, the more chance that that skill is going to be maintained for the long term. So why is maintenance important? Well, maintenance is really important because, similar to generalization, it promotes lifelong learning and self-improvement. We want our children to be as prepared for life as possible. Learning and self-improvement skills, which can be strengthened in and of themselves, will open up more and more opportunities for your child as they practice and develop them. And the more they do it, the greater the opportunity it'll be available to them in the future in other locations, areas, with different people, etc. Again, it goes back and it strengthens generalization. Practicing and performing skills in multiple settings is a major goal in ABA. When your child learns new behaviors at home or at school, having them learn to apply it in all settings will go a long way in that long-term retention, as I said before. And some learners are appropriate for a time, setting, or age, but there are plenty of instances where some children need practice modifying that particular skill to as they age or to changes in their environment over time. For example, learning skills or behaviors practiced in school settings should continue to be modified as they progress through their education and through different grades. So as I said before, it's going to improve that long-term retention. All people lose mastery skills over time. Think about even ourselves. I know it's been a while since I've been on a bike, not like I was as a child, right? So remember, when I get back on that bike, it's going to take me a few minutes to kind of get back into the routine of things, right? And feel comfortable doing it. So that's why maintenance is really important, because every now and then you need to try out that skill again, right? So think about some of the things that maybe your child has learned in the past, but you haven't really seen them do it for a while. Pull out those materials, give them the opportunity to practice that activity again. It's like, it's been a while since you've played Monopoly or Uno. It takes you a minute to learn those rules again and get back into the swing of things, right? So you always want to pull things out that you've done in the past just to practice them and make sure that your child still remembers what those skills are. This can be imperative for situations such as like calling for help, ordering food, plenty of daily tasks that would adversely affect a person if they find themselves unprepared without assistance, right? So sometimes, practicing, we teach our children to maybe remember our phone number as parents. And if we don't practice that oftentimes, and then, they might be in a situation where they need to call and they can't remember the number, right? So how do we ensure that maintenance happens, right? Well, we have to plan for it. Just as generalization, we have to plan for that. We have to fade out our prompts and reinforcement used to teach the skill and fade it to a naturally occurring condition of instruction and reinforcement. It's important that for skills that we may not use frequently, periodically, as I just kind of said, you want to think about contriving situations where your child might need to perform that skill. This can ensure that this skill has not been forgotten, and it'll give your child a refresher of performing the skill independently. Life skills that require maintenance will fade if you allow your child to do them halfway, or if you revert to easier behaviors, right? So you always want to keep up those expectations of what they were able to do independently, right? And I know myself as a parent, sometimes, in the rush of the morning, I'm thinking about my children can get dressed to go outdoors themselves, but sometimes I'm rushing in the morning because I need to get to work on time. So I'm kind of helping them along to make sure that, we're in a rush. We got to do this. I got to do up your zipper quickly. But when there is the opportunity for them to continue to do it independently, you always want to give them that opportunity, because you don't want them to get used to always helping them, right? And I know myself, like I said, I'm guilty of it too, because sometimes there's situations in life where we kind of have to do things for our kids because we need to move along or we have to get somewhere, right? So in the long run, though, just remember that it's always really, really important for them to really continue to practice those skills to ensure that they're not lost and that they are really retained. So you want to consider making them a part of the routine, making learning and practicing skills more comfortable and predictable, and that's really going to enhance the value of your child's time practicing. So I'm going to turn it over to Natalia now, and she's going to start to talk about homeschool communication.
Thank you, Michelle. So we know that the communication between parents and caregivers and the classroom teacher is an important part when we think about generalizing and maintaining skills that your child has learned at school into the home. And so this is an important consideration to think about at the beginning of the school year to really have that conversation with your child's classroom teacher to establish and determine a mode of communication that is feasible and that works best for the family and classroom teacher. And we know that it can be difficult for the classroom teacher to speak to parents at drop off time or at pickup time, as many students may be using transportation. And so parents may not be able to see the classroom teacher to engage in any conversation about their child. So, different ways that the homeschool communication can happen are as follows. The parent can schedule a meeting with the classroom teacher. The sometimes classroom teachers establish a homeschool communication book, which provides the parent and the classroom teacher to share information back and forth. Another opportunity is attending parent-teacher conference nights, which is another opportunity to get progress updates and to ask your classroom teacher any questions or to share any important information. If your child has an individual education plan, there often is the opportunity to provide feedback on a form that is sent home to families, where families have the opportunity to share their child's strength, some areas of growth, and any goals they may have for their child to be worked on. As parents and caregivers, you have a wealth of knowledge about your child. You know them the best. You know their interests. You know the things that they dislike, as well as situations that can cause frustration or be challenging for your child. And so when we think about sharing information, it really provides you as the parent or caregiver the opportunity to talk about the skills that the child may be demonstrating at home that is also important for the teacher to know. So for example, if you are using a picture schedule or some form of a to-do list to support your child with the morning routine at home, that is important information for the classroom teacher because it could be something that they can implement in the classroom as well. So the communication goes back and forth in terms of sharing information. It's also important to share um, not only to receive information about what is being done at school, but really to also share about successes that you are having at home so that the teacher is aware of some of those gains and skills that the child is demonstrating at home that may be incorporated into the classroom setting as well. And we want to ensure that communicating with your child's classroom teacher is not only occurring when there are challenges, communicating about positive things as well is also important. So if your child is participating in an extracurricular activity, if they're demonstrating a new skill at home, if they've taken on a new interest, these are all things as well that's important for the classroom teacher to be aware of. We know that some students may be accessing services through various community agencies, and so this is also another opportunity where applicable to share, what skills are being worked on through those providers. So, for example, if your child is receiving speech and language services, you can share with the classroom teacher what goals or strategies that are being worked on to support the child's communication, and vice versa. um, you can share with the teacher can also share what goals they're working on in the classroom as well. Next slide, please. And so on the screen here, we just have one example of a home school communication, which is a page from a school communication book. And as we said, the homeschool communication can look very different. It's really going to be about what you and the classroom teacher agree upon as to what is feasible and works best for everyone. So on the screen, there is a sample page of from a homeschool communication book. And there is a section for the parent or caregiver to provide any updates, anything that is important for the teacher to know. And there's also a box for the parent or caregiver to share information as well. And at the top, there are icons that represent the daily routine or activities of the classroom day. And oftentimes students may be able to circle or check mark things that they participated in during the day. And so as parents and caregivers receiving that information, it really provides an opportunity to know, what your child was doing throughout the day, different activities, and also creates opportunities for conversation or for the parent or caregiver to comment to the child about their day. Next slide, please. So when we think about, we know that when your child is at school, they're learning lots of different skills that can be demonstrated in the home. And so we're going to just focus and highlight just a few skills today. And so on the screen, we've listed a few skill areas. They include putting items away, daily routines, learning how to wait, and engaging in independent activities leisurely. And so, one of the questions you sort of want to think about when you're establishing that homeschool communication and you want to learn what skills your child is working on at school, you want to think about, what skill is my child demonstrating at school that you would like them to demonstrate at home. And also thinking about, what skills are they doing at home that you would think it's important for the classroom teacher to be aware of. So when we think about in the home and putting items away, we think of examples such as, tidying up after a meal. So maybe putting your plate and cutlery in the sink. We think about putting items away around the home. So maybe depending on the age of your child, they may be putting laundry away. They may be supporting and helping with unloading the dishwasher. They may be helping with putting groceries away or hanging up their backpack when they come home from school. And then when we think about daily routines, some examples may include, the routine to get ready in the morning. So brushing their teeth, getting dressed, having breakfast, maybe getting ready to go to a special event or getting ready to go outside to play at the playground. Um, when we think about waiting, we know that there are times during the day where we may need to be expected to wait for a next activity or next task. And so in the home or out in the community, that may look like waiting in line at the library to sign out a book or waiting, in the waiting room for an appointment. And we know that there are various activities that are of interest to students. So that they enjoy as leisurely activities. So that can look can incorporate things such as, listening to music, watching a favorite show, playing a game with a sibling or parent or caregiver, playing a sport, drawing. I mean, the options are kind of endless in terms of, what it is that person enjoys as a leisurely activity. Next slide, please. And so we're going to go through each of the skill areas and really highlighting some key takeaways in working on those skills in the home. So when we think about putting items away, we know that in the school environment, there are times throughout the day when students are expected to put things away. And so, for example, that may look like, playing with toys during free time, putting their lunch bag away after they have finished eating their lunch, during the entry routine in the morning, hanging up their backpacks or hanging up their coat. And so when we look into the home and if we want to think about, how can we generalize that skill into the home, there also may be expectations and specific times when your child needs to tidy up or put things away. And so, some examples, as I've highlighted before, it could be putting books away after reading, putting art materials away when art time may be done, putting toys away, helping put groceries away in the cupboard, putting shoes away. And so, some things to consider when we're thinking about generalizing these skills into the home, initially you may need to provide a reminder leading up to your child engaging in that behavior of putting something away. So you may give them a 5-minute reminder. You may say, in 5 minutes, we're going to be putting the toys away, and then it will be lunchtime. You may need to provide an additional reminder at the 3-minute mark, 1 minute mark, and some students may need 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown as that transition of putting the item away is going to occur. Some students may benefit, your child may benefit from a timer at home on the phone where it beeps, and that is just a cue to the child that it's time to tidy up. You may want to begin having your child just putting a small number of items away. So it may just be 1 to 2 to begin with, and you can increase that amount as they demonstrate proficiency in the skill. And we want to be clear and specific about what you want your child to put away. So you may say, put the cars in the blue bin or put the cars back into the basket. The books need to go back on the bookshelf. If the child is old enough and they're able and they are helping out with groceries, you may give specific instructions such as, put the fruit in the fruit basket, or maybe in your home, the fruit goes in the fridge. And when we think about for laundry, we may say things such as, your t-shirts are going to go in the bottom drawer and your socks will go in the top drawer. Sometimes in generalizing skills, into the home environment, the child may require some cues or some prompts to really just support them in what the expectation is of what they need to do. And so that could look like providing or showing your child how to tidy up. So showing them where the item actually goes and then giving them the opportunity to practice that skill in the home environment. Another prompt or cue can be using a gesture to support your child in knowing what they should do. So you may point to the location of where the item needs to go. And we always want to provide social praise and reinforcement when our child is demonstrating a skill or generalizing a skill in the home. We want to, that really helps the student, the child in demonstrating that skill in a new setting. And so giving a lot of feedback and encouragement, letting them know that they've done a great job. You may need to embed access to a preferred activity, item, or interaction after they've demonstrated the skill, just to really support with that generalization. Next slide, please.
Natalia, can I just add something too to
Absolutely.
this slide? And I was just thinking as well too. So, putting items away, we may not think that that could, expand to such a great degree that Natalia was explaining. But also, if you think about it, it's even some early math skills, right? So putting away laundry is really sorting. You could be matching by color,
Mhm.
right? Anything that you put away, if you think about unloading the dishwasher and you're sorting the cutlery and you're putting the cutlery in the tray, they would be matching, right? That cutlery, or even um, setting the table, right? If they're helping to set the table, I've seen some in some classrooms at lunch, which could easily be transferred at home, like a visual outline that sits on the table so the child would match what items go where. So we may be thinking in our mind, oh, just putting some simple items away. But if you really think about how you could break that down in all different ways, it can be color matching. As Natalia said, it can be labeling the items, it can be sorting. It's really kind of sometimes thinking outside the box, but if
Mm.
you really want to break things down, you could tie it all in, um, different curriculum ways, right? Even if before they put the laundry away, writing out, pants, shirts, socks, and putting them visuals on different parts of the dresser, things like that. Right? These are all using the skills that they would be learning in school, and then how do we transfer them in other locations?
Thank you, Michelle. And so the next example is routines. We know that routines are sequences of events that we regularly follow. We all have routines that we follow in the home and at school, at our workplaces. And so in the school environment, we know the daily routines um, may include things such as the entry routine in the morning. So steps such as taking off your backpack, hanging up your jacket in the cubby or in a locker, changing from outdoor to indoor shoes, going into the classroom, maybe putting your homeschool communication book in a specific location. And we know that for some students, they may have a picture sequence that outlines the steps that they need to engage in to complete that routine, or it could be written out list outlining the steps. And so we know that every family has different routines. And so, really, the focus may be on how your child can follow a specific routine at home that's important for them to follow. And so, that can include looking at the nighttime routine. So, do they require a visual sequence that outlines that they need to get their pajamas on, brush their teeth, get into bed, read a book? And as Michelle outlined, that can be broken down into smaller steps. And maybe you're just focused on the brushing of teeth routine. And there may be a visual support to go with that as well to help the student generalize following routines at home. And so, similar to what we talked about above, some considerations when you're looking at establishing and teaching those routines at home, thinking about what the specific instruction or cue is that's going to help your child understand that it's time for them to engage in that routine. So, there could be a particular instruction or visual that is shown that's a cue that it's time to get that routine started. And similar to what we talked about, you may use prompts. So there could be visual supports, as you can see on the screen, with pictures and text, or just a written to do list. We may need to model or show the child what is the expectation, or we may use gestures as well. And most importantly, we want to embed that social praise that really gives them the feedback that they are doing the routine as it was instructed, and thinking about that positive reinforcement that we may need to layer on to where they get something after completing the routine to really solidify the child learning to demonstrate that skill in the home. Next slide, please. And so the next example is independent leisure activities. And so, once again, in the school, there are times in the day when students have free time and where they are able to select activities in the classroom that are of interest to them for a period of time. And so some students may require some visual supports to help them structure their time in knowing, what they can do, what they have access to, how long they can engage in those activities. And so when we think about generalizing this skill in the home, we know that there also may be periods of time where your child may be expected to engage in an activity leisurely for a period of time. And your child may need some support in knowing what to do during that time. And so, for example, the parent or caregiver may be making a meal, and depending on your child, the expectation is that they may need to be engaged in an activity, possibly in close proximity, for a short period of time. So on this screen, we've just listed two examples. And so the first picture has actual items representing what to do. And so it's laid out for the students. So first, with the food items indicates they will have a snack. The game indicates they will play a game. And then I believe it's an iPad or an iPhone indicates they will access that device for some activities. The second picture also has actual items. And so initially, the child will engage in a sorting by color activity. Then, number two, they will read a book and then they will have a snack. So these examples are they're concrete. They embed the actual items and provide a structured routine for the child to follow. This is just one example. It could be a written to-do list of activities or just to remind the child of the activities that they can have access to. Or maybe the student is able to select activities that are made available and they're able to rotate on their own, going through different activities, whether it's reading a book, whether it's engaging in an art activity, whether it's watching a show or playing a game. It really will depend on your child's interest and what they would like to engage in during that leisurely time. So, if you are interested, we do have a handout about setting up and teaching some of these independent leisure activities in the home. So I will just place the link. Give me a moment. Place the link in the chat, and you can click on the link and open that up for future reference, just as a guide to follow. Oh, there we go. Okay. Next slide, please. So we've highlighted some school skills that can be generalized into the home, and now we're going to focus on different strategies that we can use into the home to really support your child in being successful in transferring these skills into the home environment. Next slide. So we know that in the school environment, there are many opportunities to incorporate these strategies when skills are being taught. So in order to promote generalization, we want to ensure that our student, our child, can demonstrate the skill with different people in different locations, with different picture schedules, different text list, different visual icons, and also with different instructions. So I'll go through each of these and what that means in the home environment. So when we think about generalization with different people, where possible, and if it makes sense for your household and if it's feasible, you may want to involve another parent or caregiver in working on the same skill so that your child knows that they demonstrate the same behaviors, demonstrating the same skill across different people in the home. So, for example, in getting ready um, to put their toys away, if one parent or caregiver gives the instructions, it's time to put toys away, the child will demonstrate the same skill if a different caregiver or parent gives the instruction. And so when we think about comparing that to the school environment, we know that children are learning to demonstrate various skills with different classroom teachers. So when the librarian says it's time to line up, or when the gym teacher says it's time to line up, or when the classroom teacher says it's time to line up, we want to ensure that the child is demonstrating the same skill of lining up when they hear that instruction with different people in the school environment. And so, similarly, thinking about how to incorporate that at home to support that generalization. Depending on the skill you are teaching, if you're working on a similar skill in the home, you want to embed working on that skill in a different location. So if we look at tidying up, that may occur in the living room with toy items or activities. That skill can also be applied maybe if the child is cleaning up their bedroom at home, depending on the age of the child. So really thinking about the skill that you're working on and where it makes sense to support and teach the child to demonstrate that skill in different locations in the home. When we think about different materials, so if the skill you're working on to generalize in the home, if you have a picture schedule, a written list, um, you want to use different symbols or text, possibly than what is being used at school. And this is just a great way for your child to learn how to demonstrate the same skill when the materials look different. And so, for example, if you are working on generalizing hand washing at home, you may have a different, you may have a hand washing sequence with different picture icons. We know that for some students, if the materials are always the same, um, or if they're always demonstrating the skill with the same people, that can sometimes impact the generalization where they won't demonstrate the skill if something is different with the materials or if it's a different person giving the instruction. And lastly, we want to look at different instructions. And so we know that we all have experiences where someone gives an instruction in a different way. The wording is different, but we still demonstrate the same skill. And this is true at school as well. So the classroom teacher might say, it's time to clean up, it's time to put toys away. Let's get ready for snack by putting the toys back on the shelf. And so all these different instructions lead to the same behavior. And so similarly in the home, we want to try as much as possible to vary our instructions when supporting our students to generalize the skill in the home that we plan to work on. Next slide, please. Oh, go back, Michelle. Sorry. Thank you. And so another important strategy is looking at using positive reinforcement. And so we want to encourage the skills that we plan to work on in the home with our child so that they can continue to demonstrate those skills in the home. And so when we talk about positive reinforcement, that really happens when we give the child access to something, whether it's a preferred activity, item or social interaction that they really enjoy and they find motivating after they've demonstrated the skill. And so, if the child you've given the instruction tidy up and the child has put the items away or they've helped with groceries, you're really reinforcing that skill by providing a lot of social praise. So letting them know that they've done a good job, like, great job helping me put groceries away. You've done a good job putting your toys away. And you may want to provide access to a preferred item or activity after that, whether, for example, it could be there's a favorite song the child likes listening to, or an item or an activity. And it's really to reinforce those skills in the home environment as well. And when we think about positive reinforcement, when we're generalizing that skill, when we're introducing the skill into the home, we want to continue to support the maintenance of that skill. So initially, we may need to be providing more access to positive reinforcement and more support with prompts and cues. And then over time, as the child is demonstrating the skill consistently with less support, we can fade some of those prompts and cues. So use them less and less, like the gestures and some of the modeling, but we can continue to use the visual supports because those can be really important. And they may not need to be reinforced every time, maybe it's every other time. And so, really, it's thinking about how we can support that generalization of the skill into the home. So we've reached the end of the presentation. And so we just wanted to summarize some key points and some takeaways. And so, as we've mentioned earlier, the homeschool communication is an important part in generalizing skills and maintaining specific skills that your child may be working on in the classroom environment into the home, and really thinking about building that relationship with the classroom teacher by connecting to determine, what is going to be the best mode of communication that works for the classroom teacher and the family. And when you're thinking about a skill to generalize in the home, consider what makes sense for your household and what is feasible. The skill your child learned at school may look different in the home, as well as, there are different routines in the home. And really, continuing to encourage the child in demonstrating those skills through social praise and positive reinforcement to support that generalization and maintenance of skills in the home environment. Thank you for coming to our presentation today. We hope that you found some helpful information. Enjoy the rest of your day. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, thank you so much and take care.